Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from the ongoing Top Chess Engine Championship Season 28 Premier Division, Round 34 game, played August 15th. On the white end, Leela Chess 0, rated 3692, playing against Ethereal, rated 3618. Now, the start position for this one, we're not too far away. Opening-wise, we're looking at the modern defense, a same size castles game. Move 8, knight c6. This right here is our start position. Now these two have yet to play from the start, this start position with colors reversed. What move do you think Leela plays here? If you'd like to, pause the video, give this one a think. Okay, now there's one game in the Lichess Masters database from this position. That game continued with rook e1, and then black established a pawn on e5. My main takeaway from this game comes early. Kicks off from the very first move. Leela's move is knight c4. This move says you will not establish a pawn on e5, and in fact, e5 by white is now supported. This is a big deal. This will have a huge domino effect on the position, not long off from now. Black's play is knight to h5. Now, I tested out. Can black actually play e5? You can't. It is not there directly. It is not there. Black is not supporting e5 directly, nor tactically. What am I talking about? Well, if e5, I'm going to be highlighting a Pac-Man continuation where we just chop, 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 chop away. This trick is not working because in the end, there is knight takes f7, rook takes, knight, bishop takes, knight, you're up a pawn. If black continues with knight takes f2, white in the end is going to have the last laugh, and this is what it might look like. Rook takes, knight, bishop, c4, check. You're going to lose a piece next. So my point, going all the way back, is that black is unable to establish a pawn on e5. What we have here, knight h5, maybe now, paving the way for e5, but Leela says, no, I'm there first. From here, we have bishop e6. Now, if black tries to undermine the support of e5 with b5, that's a very weakening move. The knight unprotected, the rook more vulnerable. Here's how you can highlight these two weaknesses. First, by moving the knight. This is hit twice. If pawn takes, bishop e4 is very strong. b5, not a good idea. The play from here is bishop e6, and now comes g4. What are you supposed to do with this knight? Okay, from here we have the capture on e5. Knight on c recaptures. What's happening if Leela recaptured with the pawn? How does black get out of this situation? The knight out of squares. This is how. There would be, in response to pawn takes on e5, queen d7. And if pawn captures knight, not this idea. Bishop captures h3 with queen g4. That's what I thought initially. Bishop h3 in this position would run into this cute move, e6. If queen takes e6, there's knight g5 with a fork. Also, the queen is opened up to g4 in that position. The way to continue here for black would be with the doubling on the d file. Rook f to d8 carries now two threats. Queen takes bishop, and bishop captures knight, exploiting the pin. So how it might play out from here, the bishop backs off. We see a series of exchanges on d1, and then in the end, the c4 knight falls. So we don't have in this position pawn takes pawn. It is knight c, takes on e5. From here, bishop captures knight is played. That certainly at first glance seems very awkward. Black with that move is opening up a different square for the knight on g7. why not maybe first capture the knight or simply move the knight to f6? Let's touch on each. If you take the knight, now this is a big problem. You don't have f6. Also, black would not have the following resource in this line, namely to form the battery. The battery in this case would now only carry one threat. There is not a liability on c4, no knight on c4 with this line. White has many ways out of this situation. So this is why knight takes knight is no good. What's the story about knight f6? Why not knight f6? Knight g5 is considered very strong, ready to swipe the bishop and saddle black with doubled e-pawns. And the other detail is that if black addresses this idea to swipe the light square bishop with bishop d7, f4 is considered very strong. Gluing this knight in here, very difficult piece to work around. If ever captured, I mean, this is already considered a winning position for white. Fantastic center. There's even tricks in the air. Knight d5, there's a capture, bunch of captures on f7, queen f3 with a fork. So just this one two-move combination, let's say, to play knight g5 and follow it up with f4, gluing in the knight, excellent for white. All right, how it is played here, we see bishop captures knight, pawn captures bishop, phi khetto knight. This is what Leela is going to play against pretty much for the rest of the game. This one poorly placed piece. From here, queen e2, queen d7, bishop c2, doubling on the d file, bishop f4, h5. How to react to this pressure on g4? If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video. What move would you play here? Okay. Leela's move, knight h2, not budging. Maintains g4. This knight remains out of play. Now, there's of course this question, well, Leela's knight on h2 isn't so bright either, but that can change. There's eventually a way to maybe play it where you put the pawn on f3, g4 is secure, and you reroute the knight, maybe something like this. This knight continues to struggle. All right, from here we have a5, rook on f to d1, queen c8, and no rook exchange. So moments like this in the game, I like trying to make sense of why not exchange rooks? Space. Leela has some space here with e5. Now, normally when I look at the invasive pawns, I think, okay, let's preserve the minor pieces, but can we also maybe apply the major pieces or add the major pieces to that list? Is it useful to maybe keep rooks on in this case if you're playing with this pawn on e5? It does take away one of the squares on the d file, d6. There aren't a whole lot of entry points, even if black, let's say, doubles up on the d file. What are your options? These that I have highlighted are not any options. You have two squares. And then what? I mean, what wonderful thing are you doing from there? Another way to look at it, this pawn is very strong. If black ever tries to challenge it with f6, you're now going to unleash this battery. There's other weaknesses to point to. g6. It's difficult to challenge this pawn. Black has to continually work around it. All right, from here, we have rook on f to e8, b3, rook back to f8. It's pretty clear with black's last two moves, it's struggling to find a way to make progress. It's not a whole lot of progress. You're just passing. From here, slow improvements by Leela. a4, a pawn wasn't doing anything. All right, let's advance it two squares. Not any great weaknesses connected with a4. Some space on the queen side. Knight repositioned to where exactly? Maybe now that b3 is a bit sensitive, this is possible, but Leela immediately targets a weak point. Knight no longer around watching over that. Pressure on e7. Knight returns. Bishop c1. King h7. Ethereal's coming up with an interesting maneuver these next handful. King h7. f4. Rook h8. And now king g8. That's pretty slick. Now there's this idea to maybe capture rook h4, target g4, possible exchange sacrifice. Right, let's see how Leela handles this. Rook a2. Certainly a bit mysterious. What's going on with rook a2? Let me share with you one of the first thoughts I had. I thought, well, okay, the bishop is going to back off to d1. The rook is going to slide over, and then the bishop will go back to c2, and that's your way to activate the queen rook. But that doesn't seem to really ever be working out. For instance, if I'm to make a passing move for black, say rook here, if you ever try this, there's a tactic available to black, taking on d1, and then bishop takes on b3 with a fork. So we're going to see that at some point there is this idea to shift the rook over on the king side. See the capture on g4, follow up queen d7. If black pinpoints g4, there's queen g3, and the rook is challenged right away. So what we have here, queen d7, queen g3, and at this point, Ethereal gives up the exchange and then follows up with bishop captures g4. We play the that imbalance, the exchange. Black has a pawn for it. Without the g pawn, the knight finally has a decent square to look forward to, f5 or h5. Now, why maybe does Ethereal feel it necessary to play in this way? I tested this one out for a bit. I played around with the pieces. Some of the moves Stockfish is looking at, Stockfish 17.1, it's looking at queen d5 and also pretty much a passing move, king f8. Now, let me first touch on queen d5. Now, if queen d5 is played here rather than the exchange sacrifice idea, I mean, what is the consistent follow-up after queen d5? Like, what's your next move? Okay, maybe a check here. But after bishop e3, the question here is now what? What do you have exactly, black? I had a look at these 5 ranks here, and it's really impressive to note the number of squares white controls. In fact, if I took time out to highlight all the squares white controls, it would take too long. Let me just highlight the ones white does not control. Pawn on c3, pawn on a5, queen on g3, rook on a2. Okay, you occupy a few of these squares, but do not control them. 4 of the 40 squares are not under control by white. What do you do as a follow-up to queen d5? You have nothing. In fact, what might be right around the corner if black had played in this way rather than the exchange sacrifice is rook a1 to d1 and the queen is out of squares. No consistent follow-up with queen d5. Now, let us say, rather than queen d5, that black shuffled about with the king. Let me show you how Leela may have made progress. So rather than the exchange sacrifice, let's say king f8. Leela could play bishop e3. I'm just shuffling for black. Rook b2, temporarily defending the b pawn. More shuffling. The bishop can improve. And here's where we can now see a quick queen rook transfer to the g file. Now, what's the story here? Well, check it out. If this B pawn is now picked up, now you can continue with F5. Good luck defending this. E6, F6, a capture on G6, all looks super appealing. Forget about trying to challenge the bishop. That's going to run into a pin. This is one way you might see progress made if Ethereal did not go for the exchange sacrifice. Two connected pawns like this, a pawn duo on the 5th rank, extremely strong. This battery ready to just be unleashed should there be a capture on F5. Okay, how it is played in this one, Ethereal at this stage right here after Queen G3 goes for rook captures knight. Queen captures rook, bishop captures pawn, and from here we're going to see how Leela now converts this ending. Light square bishop exchange, queen recaptures. If the knight had recaptured queen h3 nearby, rook h2. Okay, queen captures bishop it is. Battery formed. Mate threat on h8, parried. From here, queen h3, queen exchange. Leela up the material, welcomes a rook exchange. Declines. Very active post. F4 now secure. Knight has a restriction. Black frees the knight up with b6. Rook's doubled. Knight reposition. b4 break. Let's open more lines for this extra. Rook. Black takes once, but not twice. From here, knight e6 is played. Knight takes b4 would allow the rook exchange and Leela's rook to run wild. Going to be collecting the pawn back shortly. This is a winning line for white. So what we have, rather than knight takes b, knight e6, now this is a threat. Now it's covered. Knight on c to d4. Passed a pawn for Leela. Let's see how Leela works with that. Getting out of any checks with king f1. Knight b3, bishop e1. Pawn takes, king g7. Now, something I tested out, this idea, c5 rather than king g7, cutting off the rook from defending the pawn. Here's the thing, you don't need to defend this pawn directly with two pieces. So in response to c5, rook at d6 is away. Maybe next up a6, or should the pawn start to run, you get behind it. As an example, here's the thing, the a pawn is poison. If Ethereal plays in this position, knight takes a, there's this pin idea. So we don't see c5, it's king g7, rook b5, knight on b to c5, bishop f2, find a new home. There is a fork nearby. Okay, rook a1, blockade, bishop e3, g5 break, takes, f4 met with rook b4. We have a skewer here. Knight check, king g2, knight f5, and from here, bishop d2. So I had to crunch the numbers on this one. Why not go ahead and capture on f4 in this position? What's going on if you capture on f4? Well, this is now considered a draw. There'd be a slick move here. These tricky knights. Knight f to d4 would be a draw. All of a sudden, it carries two threats. Knight captures bishop, check, and knight c2 with a fork. So the f pawn is poison. Bishop d2 in this game. Knight backs off. Leela's king plays a very active role in this ending. Let's see what this looks like. Clearly the leader in this position on the 5th rank, the others on ranks 1 and 2. Eventually, the way to try and break things down is to put pressure, remove the blockader of this pawn. Very good post for the bishop, controls the knight. This pawn is going to fall shortly, and you welcome the rook exchange. just waiting for this knight to move to have things simplify, and then this pawn could finally start marching on. Ethereal trying to hold on to that square. So let's see the progress, a little shuffling action. From here, rook c4 check if rook captures bishop. Rook on e takes knight is winning, preventing any quick knight improvement to c6. The rooks would really dominate. The knight in that position wouldn't have a good square. We have a check, king b3. And let us see the progress. A nice post here for the rook. Supports the bishop, maintains pressure on the knight. There's no tricks, keep in mind. No knight c5 with check. The rook on the rook on f6 is covered. So king backs off. We see a check. And the bishop now rerouting to e3. Knight d7. Some distance. Ready to land some checks. King improvement. Ready to advance the pawn. Blockaded. Challenged right away. Rook activity. Knight on g to f8. Rook e7, placing a restriction on something. Now what? From here, we have rook d6. What's right around the corner for Leela, if a knight move is played here, let's say knight g6, there's bishop b6. This is a way to break down the position with the idea to take away on c7 and then win the rook. So the try from here, rook d6, a pawn advances, and now we're looking at possibly getting to the back rank, a check, rook d7. Why welcome the rook exchange? If the rook goes back here, it's looking at rook b3, some rook b7 idea. All right, we see a rook exchange at this stage. Now the king will find it much easier to make headway. No rook on board, very active piece. And eventually it's going to simplify a bit more. There we go. Bishop for knight exchange. A check. King takes pawn. It's a good thing there's still a knight here. Otherwise it is stalemate. From here we have knight f6, rook a4, knight g8. This knight has been having a very tough day. This is the king knight. Very easy to lose track of what knight this is. This is the king knight. This is the knight that has been struggling, the fianchetto knight. It's eventually going to be scooped up in this game. Now, rook versus knight ending in plenty of positions, a theoretical draw, but not here. It's just way too out of play. We have a nice finish coming up here with rook d7 check. The king goes back. There we go. A fork to win the knight. We have king a6. And now a really cool move. The king just takes a step back, and now what? If the king moves its mate, the knight has three options. This is covered directly, and the other two covered indirectly. After knight f6, we now see a fork, picking up the knight, and of course, just a mate in a handful. So this was a nice game. I wasn't super excited about the ending here, the conversion. My main takeaway was really dating all the way back to move one, the starting position for this one. As mentioned in the one game in the Lichess Masters database, from this start position, we saw rook e1 and e5. Leela says, no, I'm going to play e5, and that's going to give you a problem. And boy, did it ever give black a problem. This knight was a struggling piece right to the very end. Anyhow, your thoughts with this one, feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.